Romney's out. Who remains in the running for the 2016 Republican nomination for president? Creation stewardship. As the EPA chief visits the Vatican, we look at the church's approach to protecting the environment. Super Bowl sex for sale. No fun and games for the girls and women trapped in sex trafficking. And celebrating Catholic schools. We meet some dynamic young teachers bringing their gifts to Catholic education. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, January 30th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has wrapped up meetings at the Vatican. This comes ahead of the much-anticipated papal encyclical on the environment. Wyatt Goolsby joins us from the EPA headquarters here in Washington tonight with more.
Brian, the EPA and the Vatican have been discussing a variety of environmental-related issues. The church does not agree on every issue with the Obama administration, but the head of the EPA is applauding Pope Francis for his engagement.
From protecting natural resources to using more renewable energy, EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy says it is important the U.S. work with the Pope to tackle some of the world's toughest environmental challenges. Those same top Vatican officials are helping the Holy Father write a papal encyclical, or a document meant to clarify Catholic teaching. It will address ecology. Earlier this month, Francis said that climate change is real. The Holy Father saying, "I don't know if human activity is the only cause, but mostly, in great part, it is man who has slapped nature in the face. We have, in a sense, taken over nature, over Sister Earth, over Mother Earth." The Pope hopes a UN environmental summit in Paris in November will make courageous decisions to protect God's creation. Francis is not the first pope to address the environment. His predecessor, Pope Benedict, was known to many informally as the first green pope. In 2008, Benedict had thousands of solar panels installed in the Vatican and began a reforestation project to offset the Vatican's CO2 emissions. In 2009, the Pope Emeritus said, "The earth is indeed a precious gift of the Creator, who, in designing its intrinsic order, has given us bearings that guide us as stewards of His creation." The Church considers matters concerning the environment and its protection intimately linked to the theme of integral human development. Francis has echoed Benedict's message, and his upcoming encyclical has drawn more speculation than any papal document in recent memory.
The Obama administration is seeking to hitch its climate change message onto that of the popular Pope. The Vatican has not released any information with regards to today's meeting. What remains to be seen is if the Pope's message and viewpoints on ecology will or will not translate with the president's. In Washington, Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. A deadline for a possible prisoner swap has now passed. The fates of a Japanese journalist and a Jordanian military pilot held by the Islamic State are still unknown tonight. The Jordanian government says it will only release an al-Qaeda prisoner from death row with proof that the Jordanian pilot is alive. The hostage drama began last week with the Islamic State releasing a video threat. The terrorists demanding a ransom of $200 million for 2 Japanese hostages. That demand has since shifted to one for the release of an al-Qaeda prisoner held in Jordan. ISIS now claims to be holding a Jordanian airman. The terrorists reportedly killed one of the Japanese hostages, but that still has not been confirmed. The death toll from a deadly blast at a mosque in southern Pakistan now rising to 49. Officials say 31 wounded are still in area hospitals. The community is about 300 miles north of the port city of Karachi. The blast targeted a mosque belonging to members of Pakistan's minority Shiite community. This happened during Friday prayers. The mosque was packed with worshipers. A Sunni militant group claims responsibility for the attack. Sunni Muslim extremists don't consider Shiites to be true Muslims. A senior Kurdish military commander and 8 of his fighters have been killed in clashes with the Islamic State. The casualties near the northern Iraqi city of Kirkuk are a heavy setback for the Iraqi Kurds. They've been at the forefront of the battle against ISIS, which has captured a third of Iraq and Syria. Attacks elsewhere today killed 27 people with twin bombings. The terrorists targeted a crowded market in Baghdad and a military checkpoint north of the capital. Well, the president of the Philippines is ordering a manhunt for a terror suspect who escaped an anti-terrorist operation that resulted in the death of 44 police commandos. Today is a national day of mourning for the largest single-day combat loss in recent years. The president offered prayers at each of the flag-draped coffins during today's memorial service. The police were killed Sunday in what's being called an accidental clash with that country's largest Muslim rebel group. It is causing public outrage and testing the government's peace deal signed with the insurgents last year. Pope Francis had been visiting the Philippines less than a week before this deadly clash took place. Pope Francis offers words of encouragement to Catholic and Orthodox leaders working on dialogue between the churches. The Pope met with the group at the Vatican today, praising their work over the last dozen years. The Holy Father asked the leaders to continue their journey in a spirit of brotherhood. He also said all Christians are called to work together to serve the cause of peace and justice. U.S. Attorney General nominee Loretta Lynch picks up key GOP endorsements after her confirmation hearings this week. Lynch's father, a Baptist minister, attended the hearings and he talked with our Suzanne LaFranchi.
I was proud of her calmness. I was proud of her directness. I was proud of her, I call it not blowing up under pressure. She's been like that for a long time.
With her likely confirmation, Lynch is poised to become the first black woman serving in the nation's top law enforcement job. As jury selection continues for the Boston Marathon bombing trial, questions are being raised about who can and cannot serve as jurors. To be seated on the jury, people must express a willingness to consider both the death penalty and life in prison as possible punishments. Yohar Zanayev is accused in the 2013 bombing at the Boston Marathon finish line. It killed 3 people and injured more than 260. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges. Prospective jurors have said they can't be impartial because they believe Zanayev is guilty or they're not willing to impose the death penalty. Father Dominic Legg, a former attorney for the U.S. Department of Justice, now a theology professor at the Dominican House of Studies here in Washington, back with us today. Father, does this criteria mean that faithful Catholics can't serve on that jury?
Well, it depends on how the judge poses the questions and how strictly he interprets the legal criteria, but also on how people answer those questions. So if you're asked, for example, will you apply the death penalty in many cases, well, that might pose a problem for Catholics. If you're asked, do you have an absolute objection to the death penalty in all cases, I think faithful Catholics, even according to the teaching of John Paul II, could say yes.
So there are circumstances where the death penalty is warranted?
Well, what John Paul II taught in Evangelium Vitae, for example, his encyclical in 1995 that addressed this, is that when bloodless means are available to a public authority to protect the public order and public safety, they should be chosen. But in some cases, where it's necessary, other means, like the death penalty, could be used. Now, he thinks the cases are very rare for that. But it isn't a case where a Catholic would be bound in absolute conscience to say there is no case where the death penalty could be applied. And that would mean Catholics could, in fact, under oath say, I'm not absolutely opposed to the death penalty, and then you would be impaneled on the jury.
Many Catholics are opposed to the death penalty, pro-life Catholics especially. So is there can this be seen at all as discrimination against people who believe that way?
Well, I think, are these requirements, this kind of question that's being asked at the impaneling of a jury, is that a good idea? I would say no. In fact, it's a very bad idea because it does tend to give you a jury that's going to be, in general, more favorable to imposing the death penalty. And as Catholics, of course, we think that the death penalty should be used really only in very rare cases, if at all. But it is possible in some circumstances, as the Church has acknowledged for a long time, for that to be applied. The question is a judgment that an individual juror, looking at the circumstances of the case and the circumstances of the society, would have to decide.
So we've talked a little bit about the various possibilities here in terms of Catholic belief. Can you clarify Catholic teaching on this issue of the death penalty?
So the Catholic Church teaches that life is sacrosanct, a gift from God, and that we must always act to protect and defend life. So Pope John Paul II puts the death penalty in the category of self-defense. When there is no alternative to protect innocent life, you can use violence and even potentially kill an aggressor to protect innocent life. That's the context that he sets it in. So when society is so threatened that there's no other alternative, that's when he would say the death penalty could conceivably be used, but he thinks that really it's very rare that that circumstance would obtain, say, in a modern society like our own.
Because there is an alternative.
Yes, because you could imprison someone for life, for example.
So do you see the death penalty laws or the use of the death penalty in America changing anytime soon? We know that there have been problems with it, and there has always been debate over it.
Well, I think the church will continue to bear witness for the sanctity of life, and that it's very important that we do so. It does look like there is popular support in public opinion polls for the death penalty. I mean, I would hope that we would do more to move past the death penalty and have it be something that belongs to our past.
Father Dominic Legg at the Dominican House of Studies here in Washington. It's always good to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, as Catholic Schools Week ends, the growing Latino population may be the answer to more diversified Catholic education. And a new generation of Catholic school teachers forms children in faith and wisdom. It's Friday, the 30th of January, and tomorrow the church honors St. John Bosco. Don Bosco dedicated his life to helping Italian children make something of their lives. He is the patron of youth, Catholic publishers and editors, and founder of the Salesians of St. John Bosco. Thanks for joining us on this Friday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and we know tonight who isn't running for president in 2016. A big-name veteran Republican steps aside today. Jason Calvi joining us now with that story.
Brian, Mitt Romney says it was a hard decision, but he won't run for president in 2016. For 3 weeks, he publicly floated the idea of a third run, but today the former Massachusetts governor broke the news to supporters. Mitt Romney sounded like he was launching another run for president today.
One poll out just today shows me gaining support and leading the next closest contender by nearly 2-1. Also leading in all of the 4 early states. So I'm convinced that we can win the nomination.
But he says it's best to give other Republicans the chance to become the next nominee. If there won't be a third Romney campaign, how about a third Bush in the White House? Jeb Bush, here speaking before Pope Benedict's inauguration in 2005.
As a Catholic and as an American, this is really a chance of a lifetime, and I'm so honored to be here.
Jeb Bush would only be the second Catholic president, but it doesn't look like he has the support of Romney today.
I believe that one of our next generation of Republican leaders, one who may not be as well known as I am today, one who has not yet taken their message across the country, one who's just getting started, may well emerge as being better able to defeat the Democrat nominee.
And today, even the White House praised Mitt Romney.
Certainly, Governor Romney is a man of great faith and a man who has tremendous loyalty and commitment to his country.
Catholic commentator Catherine Jean Lopez says it's up to Catholics to let candidates know what issues are important to them.
Now is the time for Catholic voters to be saying to people who they like, who they think are potential presidential candidates, hey, this is a serious issue and we need real policies that are going to help people. The sort of travesty of the American political situation is, as a Catholic, I sort of focus my attention on the Republican Party because of the life issue.
And the National Right to Life Committee will be putting out a guide on where candidates of both parties stand on those issues like abortion and euthanasia. But Brian, it's just too early for that guide to come out anytime soon.
An interesting political day. Thank you, Jason. Latino enrollment is increasing at U.S. Catholic schools. The need for schools to welcome more children from diverse backgrounds was a prime topic for U.S. Catholic bishops at their fall meeting. The percentage of Latino children enrolled in U.S. Catholic schools rose from 12.8% to 15% in the past 4 years. But the bishops raised concerns that parish schools are often not affordable for minority communities. They say Catholic school options can be scarce in southern and western areas. That's where the Catholic population has grown the most, often thanks to Latinos. Father Joe Capora, a Holy Cross priest at the University of Notre Dame, joins us from South Bend by satellite. Father Joe is director of the Catholic School Advantage campaign. Father, explain the approach that you're taking there to help diversify Catholic schools.
We work a lot with principals and pastors and bishops on how to recruit Latino students to Catholic schools. There's a whole program that we do, and if the principal and the pastor set their mind and heart to it, they're going to be successful in recruiting Latino students. It has to do with how to incentivize people, how to understand where they're coming from, or, for example, if I have a product and you don't know you can have it, the product being Catholic schools, then I have to figure out how to convince you you can have the product.
All right, so give us an example of how your model is working. Let's look at St. Gertrude the Great.
Yep, which is in Bell Gardens, California, a school that had maybe 44 kids. The principal, the pastor, came to a workshop at Notre Dame, began to implement many of the strategies that we think work, and their schools up to almost 200 students right now. It has to do with how they recruit, finding people to recruit other people, making the school culturally responsive to a Latino world, having someone in the office that can speak Spanish or communicate somewhat in Spanish. These are some of the things that we're recommending, suggesting, and where schools are doing these things, and I've only mentioned a couple of a whole list of 30, they're going to increase enrollment. But the biggest thing is it's got to be in the principal's mind and heart to do it.
And why do you think it's so important that our Catholic school system does include, especially the Latino population, but really all minorities?
Well, in terms of Latinos, the future of the church is Latino. In some places, it's the present of the church. And since leaders come out of our schools, it behooves us to educate and welcome and form Latino students who are going to be leaders in the church in the very near future. And the church owes its best energy to people that have not had the benefit of a Catholic education.
And certainly they bring a wonderful culture to the church here in America. Father Joe Capora, the Holy Cross priest at University of Notre Dame, who directs the Catholic School Advantage campaign. Thanks for joining us by satellite tonight, Father.
Brian, thanks a lot for having me. Have a good day.
Interestingly, I went to school with Father Joe and his brother Jim in Easton, Pennsylvania. Religious sisters taught us, and brothers. They taught people of my age, and they lived in community. Mark Irons finds that today some Catholic lay teachers are actually forming communities of their own.
Growing up, Kevin Coughlin got some advice from his dad.
My dad always told me, he goes, you can be anything you want to be, just don't be a teacher.
Guys, it's just a gift. But Kevin didn't follow that advice and is now teaching English class at Archbishop Carroll High School in Washington, D.C. Annie Trotta is also a teacher, one floor down. But the two aren't just teachers, they're also students with the Alliance for Catholic Education, or ACE. The University of Notre Dame runs the 2-year fellowship. Father Lou Delfra has worked with ACE for 20 years.
Our applicants are, on the whole, not education majors.
ACE students spend a summer learning teaching methods at Notre Dame and then spread across the country in groups. This year, 178 fellows are teaching classes at under-resourced Catholic schools.
We're introducing really talented young men and women into the teaching profession in Catholic schools. We try to surround them with pastoral support during their years. It's a really hard 2 years.
First-year teacher Aletha Duchesne has relied on her faith in God.
I find myself praying to him over the littlest things, but it has relieved so much of my anxiety and my frustration.
Teaching can be tough. That's why ACE teachers also have the support of a community. There are 31 communities around the country. In D.C., 7 teachers live in a group home.
I know that I can talk to my peers about how the day went, about how I could improve, about what went well.
Back in the classroom, Kevin and Annie are on year 2 of teaching. In exchange for their service, they'll graduate with a cost-free master's in education from Notre Dame.
One of the statistics we're most proud of in ACE is after 20 years, 70% of our participants are still in education. The overwhelming majority stay in Catholic school.
In 21 years, ACE has produced over 1,300 teaching fellows, a win for student teachers and Catholic schools. And as National Catholic Schools Week comes to a close, prospective ACE teachers are now being interviewed for placements in the fall. In Washington, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, an eye-opening display at this year's Super Bowl will highlight the scourge of sex trafficking and some heavenly views of one of America's best-known natural wonders. Good Friday evening on this 30th of January, and as Human Trafficking Awareness Month ends, the focus turns to the prevalence of sex for sale surrounding the Super Bowl. An Atlanta ad agency with a group called Shared Hope International creatively spreads the word that children aren't playthings. Watch this. Nancy Winston is Senior Director at Shared Hope International. This is a Virginia-based organization that's countering the trafficking, sex trafficking. So you put a person in a box that looks like a toy, but it's the size of a person. What message are you sending?
Well, it's clear what message we're sending. It's written right on the box. It says kids are not playthings. Children are not playthings. And the message we're trying to send is that sex trafficking of children has got to stop. That's the message.
In seeing that video that you produced for the 2013 conference here in D.C., I was amazed to see the reaction of people. There's a camera in the box that sees what they're looking at. What kind of impact is this having?
It's had a tremendous impact because not everyone responds to stories, the real stories and accounts of sex trafficking, or even the stories of victims of sex trafficking. Some people respond better to art and to something that visually slaps you in the face, and that definitely did. We were very careful to get a model for that was over 18 because we ourselves didn't want to be victimizing anybody too, but it turned out to be very impactful for everyone that attended the conference and people just on the street.
The Super Bowl and other big sports events are just prime for this human trafficking. How bad is this problem?
Well, all estimates say at least 100,000 kids, U.S. citizens or legal permanent residents, not foreigners, that are subject to commercial sexual exploitation every year, and that's primarily prostitution, pornography, and other forms of sexual exploitation. So it's a big number, and if you compare that to foreign victims brought into the United States, which is probably somewhere around 20,000, we realize we have a very huge problem with our own youth in this country.
And they're all human beings. They're God's children.
They are God's
children. So Phoenix is trying to stem this before the Super Bowl starts. We're going to look at some of the public service announcements that are running. Do you think that awareness is growing since past Super Bowls to this problem?
It definitely is. The Super Bowl is a big event that draws attention all around the country and draws attention to this issue, especially right on the heels of National Human Trafficking Month in January. And it's certainly not the only place that these kinds of crimes take place, but it's a big awareness opportunity for all kinds of sporting events and conventions that draw men there, that mostly men, that think they can use children for sex, that it's a victimless crime.
Well, this is a very creative approach, and I know that people are taking notice, and I hope that it has the desired effect. We appreciate the good work you're doing. Nancy Winston with Shared Hope International. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And for the second time in 2 months, a rare weather phenomenon could be seen at the Grand Canyon. It's known as total cloud inversion, a spectacular formation filling the Grand Canyon with thick clouds to just below the rim. It happens when warm air traps cold air deep in the canyon, and it normally happens once every several years. So this is rare. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. Until Monday, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. Good night, and God bless you.